Hey YouTube, so we are at stage 2 now of this Ibanez GAX50. This is 2001, so it's an older instrument, but after getting my hands on it and everything, I think this is a gem that needs to be cleaned up and polished. And so I've been doing my thing to it, and you can see the body has really polished up nicely. The bit of, I don't know what it was. It was more than just a smudge, but almost looked like paint blob or something. Anyway, I thought it was maybe hiding something. It wasn't. And that buffed off. It took a little work, but that buffed off. And, it's got a good number of little bruises, little dings on it. But check out this rosewood fretboard. Is absolutely gorgeous. It was very dry, so I waxed it up good with my carnauba wax, but this has got some really gorgeous wood on the fretboard. So in this episode, what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through what I've done to the guitar so far, and my current project is restoring the tuners. And so I'm going to talk about the tuners and what I've been doing to restore them, and some of the processes I've been doing to the body. And also I'm going to show you guys the pickups that I selected for it. And so very excited to share that with you as well. So stay tuned as we get into the second stage of this Ibanez GAX50 rebuild. So let's talk about the tuners on this guy. And I was not satisfied with the tuners because they're very wobbly and just weren't really biting great. Some of them, like this one's nice and tight. This one's nice and tight. This one's super floppy. And so what I decided to do is to see if I can rebuild them. And you can get they call these semi-enclosed. And you can get these as a very old vintage style of tuner, and a lot of different companies have used these variously. I've seen them on Fenders, I've seen them all over the place. It's a very standard design, old school design. Sometimes you find them on old acoustics too. I mean, they're all over the place, very standard. Usually has a hex sort of body on the top and 2 screws on the side. And semi-enclosed means that the top part, you can hear it, is loose. And it's nice and tight when it's screwed down, but you can take this cap off and actually get at the inside of it. So when you're disassembling the semi-enclosed style tuner, there is actually a little teeny cutaway right there where it's reduced just enough that you can get the housing on and off. And it's just the right size in terms of its machine, so that you can hear it popping on, popping off. A little bit of tension, but it's just be gentle with it, and the cover is very easy to get on and off. And then this is what you have inside: a just very standard worm gear, and just 1 screw holds everything together, and then it's very precisely set. This gear here is very precisely set into the pole. Okay, so the first one that I got off here, this is the one that I've been working on. And what I did, this had, even though it's semi-enclosed, it still had crust of some unknown origin in there, and it was like, so I cleaned it all out, and I went ahead and took the gear off, which is just 1 screw. Be very careful, firm, but gentle. And I took the screw out and then pulled the gear off, and so I could get a look at everything, and popped the actual worm gear out. I cleaned everything out. One of the best things that if you don't want to leave any residue but you want to clean is using QD electronic cleaner. That has a lot of different great uses on the guitar, cleaning out electronics and stuff as well. But I cleaned it all out. What you don't want is actual lubrication in there. You can have a little bit of grease, but you don't want it to be oily, you don't want it to be slippery. And what I did to repair this one was real floppy, and now it's nice and tight. So here's one that I haven't cleaned up yet, and can't really see too well the detail, but it's crusty. I can look under it. There's some bits of some sort of foreign matter actually up in the gears there. And this one is nice and tight. So this one I'm just going to clean up. And I don't need to do what I did to the first one, which is, you see the little pieces right here. Get it to zoom in. Right here and here. Basically, those are pinching onto the worm gear. And in the one that was super floppy, one of those had bent out a little bit, or it just wasn't set all the way. So the way that I corrected that was I took it all apart. I got the gear off. Again, you have to be very careful in terms of it's in there very tight, but using a little separator, you pry it out, pop the gear off, got it all apart, got the worm gear off, and with the gear off, I can clamp these. So let me show you on one that is wobbly. Alright, so you see this one here, it's got a lot of wobble to it. It's just kind of all over the place, feels very loose, and not something that you would, you know, want to trust your tuning on. Okay, so no problem, easy to do. Just be careful, take your time. That's always the rule with all of this. So you can see this has a huge amount of play in it. And what I need to do now is take this screw off, and I'm not going to power it. I like this power screwdriver because it locks when you're not using it, so you can use it as a regular screwdriver. And it also has a torque limiter, so you can set the torque so it cuts off. A nice little screwdriver set. And alright, so I'm taking the central, there we go. So I've got the gear screw off, and you know what you want is you have to be able to pry it basically straight up. I found that the perfect little tool for this is a nice little skinny flat wrench. This there's a lot of different priers out there too. This was just I just happened to have sitting right here because it's a Dremel wrench, and so probably a lot of you, if you have a tool kit, probably have a Dremel wrench. So, you know, just very carefully, firm, but gentle, get the gear to rise up and pop off of there. And it helps to, since it's running on the worm gear, it helps to turn it every so often as you're prying it off, so you can get at it from multiple angles. And just don't rush. This is the most time-consuming part of this process, I've discovered. And you also don't want to be putting so much pressure on it that when it lets go, the gear just flies off into nowhere land and you're out of luck. Almost. And I will say for these Ibanez tuners, I mean, this is very, very tight machining. Very tight machining. There it goes. So I popped it into my palm as I was getting to the edge. I made sure that I was pushing it into my hand, and there's the gear. Alright, so we have the gear off of there, and there's the shaft. And once the gear is off, now the worm gear comes out very easily. Alright, now what I'm going to do, now that I've gotten this off, this is the base plate. And you see it has those two little hook mounts. That's where the worm gear sits in there. And what I need to do is very carefully and gently use a set of pliers to just pinch those so they're angled in just the tiniest bit more. The tiniest bit. So let me... I'm using some needle nose pliers here and just getting it to just, oh, I just pinched it the tiniest bit until I felt that it, you know, actually went a little bit, and testing it, still can go a little more. It's better to not put too much pressure, and you don't want to overdo it, but you just want a tiny little, you just want it to be, that was my youngest back there making crazy sounds. There we go, and you hear that? clicks in now. Before it was loose. So I'm going to clean out the path on the gear because it's crusty. So again, using my electrical cleaner. And you can actually see the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. There's the dirt that grime that I just melted off of that. And now, and I can see there's no bends or, chunks missing in the gear, so the gear is good. Fits in there tight now, so now I've got a nice clean gear. Now the other thing that I'm doing, this is just an aesthetic thing, is I'm restoring them by, I'm going to do a brushed stainless look on them. And that gives just a, I really like the look of brushed metal. So a little bit of time with some high grit sandpaper and my polishing wheel, and I can get the brushed look, and that's going to go with, as we'll see in just a moment, the pickups that I selected for this to swap out. So this is my process. It's, it's not fast. The easy fast thing is just to buy new tuners and throw them in there, but I just figured, I'm planning to replace them. I've got a set on order that I'll probably just hold on to, or if any of them, just can't be restored. The other thing to look at is the teeth of the gear, and everything's good. It's not, they're not bent or chipped or anything. So everything looks good. It just needs to be tightened up. Years and years of usage. I had to clean them off too. They had all sorts of like finger gunk all over them and that sort of thing. This guitar, somebody played a lot. It's got a lot of play wear, but it's not heavily damaged, and it was generally speaking cared for, but it's just crusty. Just crusty. So next thing we'll look at is the pickups. So if you go check out my initial review of this guitar when I just was getting into it, you can see what the guitar sounds like with the stock pickups and everything, just, as it came to me. But the pickups were fine. Like, they were not bad, but they did have a bit of that, like, I would call it muddy flavor, where it just got kind of like, they lost the clarity and they got real fuzzy and crunchy a little too quickly for my taste. And so I knew, right out the gate that I was planning to go ahead and replace those pickups. Again, they're not bad, and if they suit your style of music, then go for it. But what I got instead to replace them is a set of, this is a relatively new company. This is Johnny Eleca, and I found these guys on eBay. Johnny Eleca, and didn't know anything about them. They had some, neat designs. That particularly what drew my eye was this brushed stainless block style. Like, that's interesting. That's not a style that you see much, and so I'm, excited to say that this is my first, at least partially sponsored item on the channel. That I contacted them to say, hey, would you like me to demo? I'm thinking about putting these in one of my guitars, and they said, well, they didn't have enough of the stainless, and so well, what about one of the zebras or the blacks? I said, I really want those stainless. So I said, well, what if I buy one, will you send me one? So that's what we did. Was I bought one and they sent me one. So this is, and I'm going to click the little button, whee, so it is sponsored in at least the most minimal sense that I got to buy one, get one free for the pickups. But these are not expensive. I think they run them $16 to $20, their range on eBay. And like I said, they're a newer company. I don't know much about the company itself, but they drew my eye, and the script, Johnny Eleca, it's just kind of classic looking. It's got a really cool aesthetic. And I was impressed when I opened it that they come in these hard plastic cases like you would expect for a DiMarzio or Seymour Duncan or something like that. Now, it doesn't have the paperwork and everything in terms of, there's no branding on this that's, oh, Johnny Eleca and, anything like that. So that could be something that maybe they work on in the future as they expand their brand and so forth. But I was impressed that it came in that nice plastic box. Like, that was not something you expect on a budget level. And these are wax potted, vacuum wax potted, and very, I really liked the case, and looking at them, they seem like well manufactured. I was particularly impressed with the care of the ends of the wires. That they're not only, this is hard to transfer in film, so you're mostly going to have to take my word for it. They're not only, you know, twirled, but they're actually soldered just a wee bit to prevent them from becoming untwirled. And the red and the white are already soldered together. It's like, that's nice. That is a very nice feature that I did not expect to find on a sub $20, pickup. So that impressed me. The packaging impressed me. I really like the aesthetic. And so this is going to be in a follow-up, because I'm going to put everything back together like it is now with the stock pickup so that I can do true side-by-sides. After I've got the next thing I'll show you is fixing this bridge issue where the pole for the one-piece bridge, particularly that one, the other one is not bad, but that one comes right out, and so they put these big funky washers on them, and I actually did some damage to the finish as a result because of all the pressure. So there's a little, circular thing right there. Not a big deal because you don't really see it under the bridge, but it is what it is. This will be really easy to correct though. It's because it's still relatively tight. It's just not tight enough. And so a little bit of thin quickset glue is going to take care of that. But anyway, so this is going to be what it looks like in there. And I think that's going to be a really cool aesthetic. I also, you can see, replaced the knobs with some like amp style with the really nice little circular stainless on the top. And so I think that's, gives it a cool vibe too that'll go with the stainless pickup. And then again, as I'm restoring the tuners, I'm also brushing all the metal on the tuners, so it'll have a whole brushed metal vibe. I've started doing that to the back plate as well. And the whole key with brushing is to do it very lightly and lots and lots and lots of strokes. And ultimately what you get is that really cool, hazy, shiny finish on it. And so I think that will elevate the aesthetic of this guitar. And with these pickups, very interested to see how they sound in it, particularly in comparison to the stock Ibanez's. So the most functional issue that this guitar had when I received it was that the previous owner had put big thick washers on the poles for the bridge, and that it significantly raised everything, and so that meant it had very high action, and you could see that it was rising up out of there, and it was, those were just keeping it from pushing, and super easy to fix. If you've got an issue like this where you've got one of these poles rising up, very, very easy to fix. Now this stuff, I've used it on my channel a lot. I use it regularly. I'm not sponsored by them. I don't mind if they send me some money. I'm going to use it whether they send me money or not. This Starbond super fast thin. Whew, be careful. Be very, very, very careful with it. And I don't even like to use it on camera just because I'm thinking about the camera, and I need to be thinking about this stuff because it's very, very caustic. It's super thin. It seems like somehow even thinner than water. It's like slippery, and it'll go down into the cracks if you are filling in a crack, or I've used it on neck repairs. I've used it all over on guitars, and amazing stuff, but it will burn the heck out of you, and it's very, very dangerous. So work very, very carefully. Don't apply a lot of it. Don't use a paintbrush or a dropper or anything. I mean, the thing comes with like a head with a squirter, but don't. This stuff is so slick that you will get more than you intended. I kind of screwed up a neck repair on an Ibanez acoustic nylon classical guitar. I still repaired it correctly, but I was too fast with applying it, and it ended up dripping down in, and it caused some issue. I had to do a lot more work to undo the damage I did to it, and it'll never be quite perfect. But what I recommend is using an old piece of heavy gauge, like your low E string, and you see I've got a nice little angle there. I can dip it in there, and you get the tiniest amount. You don't even want a bead of it. You just the tiniest amount, And so in this case, what I'm going to do is bring it up just, you know, maybe a centimeter, about a ½ inch, and then drizzle just a few micro drops in there, and then push this back down, and that should be it. It's very easy to fix as long as you have you don't want to use wood glue, because wood glue is a filler, right? It wants to puff up and fill space. You want this to slip down into the cracks and crevices to just, and in this case you don't want a lot, because you know, in theory you might want to replace it, and so you don't need a super strong bond. You just need enough that it is not going to rise up. So just a few little doot around the edge, and then squish it down, and that should be all it needs. Alright, so the last part of this stage of restoration, I'm going to improve the conductive shielding in the electronics cavity. And there are two basic ways to do it. You can see that black paint that's in there is conductive paint, so bravo to Ibanez for having any of that in there, but it's only on the bottom, it's not on the sides. And there is conductive tape on the back plate, but a chunk of it has peeled away previously and so forth. So I'm going to reinforce the shielding on that and improve what's in the cavity. Now be careful when you're putting, I usually go with this copper conductive tape. Be careful that you're not getting anywhere near the potentiometers. If you need to make sure that they don't rotate and touch the side. If they ground out, you can have all sorts of issues. If it's close, then you can always follow up the conductive tape with a layer of rubber, regular rubber insulating electrical tape, and that will ensure that if there is any point of contact, it won't actually transfer and ground out into the conductive tape. But the conductive tape, this is just to improve the 60 hertz hum and just make sure you get nice clean tones and so forth. The other thing I'm going to do while I'm in there is clean out the potentiometers, again with that electronics cleaner. Just run them back and forth and spray it down in there. There's typically a tiny little notch, that you can spray into as you turn it, and that way you'll make sure that the brushes inside the potentiometers are nice and clean, and any kind of crackling tends to just dissipate from running that back and forth and hitting it with a little bit of contact cleaner. So that is the process that I'm putting this through. So stay tuned in terms of come back into the channel. Keep an eye out as I come back with the next stage in this restoration, where we will have side by side. Once I get everything put back together, you can see the guitar with the original pickups in it, but otherwise restored. We'll get tone samples, and then we will put those Johnny Elecas into it and see how they sound in comparison. So as always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. I really enjoy your comments, enjoy hearing from you guys, and you all have a wonderful day.